Alright, welcome back to the channel guys, and as the title of the video suggests, we are going to go over the most optimal settings if you have a potato. Is it a potato? Is it a potato? You know what? I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, now let's be honest, not everyone here is rich or has a decent enough PC. So what settings do you use to play this game if you don't have a proper PC? Now I'm going to go over every single settings and how they impact so that you can make the decision yourself. I'm not going to say use these settings. I'm just going to say what these settings do so that you can feel you can just enable what you want to enable, you can disable what you want to disable, and you decide what to do. It's fun. I don't have to do much then. But before going any further, I would just like to say, if you do like my videos, then consider pressing a like button and do subscribe to my channel for more content because, of course, there's more content coming. Now, let's move on. So here, there are a few settings in the screen menu. Now, in the screen menu, there is a field of view. I keep that at 100%. You can reduce that. It does give you a slight FPS boost, but it's not enough to justify putting it very low or very high. But if you do take it to like 105 or 110, you will lose some frames per second. I personally found that 100% was a good sweet spot between what I could see in the world and also my frame rate. But if you are struggling, then you may want to put this to the lowest setting. You might gain 2 or 3 frames there. Now the next one is FPS limit, as you can see right now. So the FPS limit is very simple, it limits your FPS. But none of these settings matter whatsoever. The only setting in this screen that actually matters is resolution scale. Now you might be thinking, why don't I just lower the resolution? Well, if you lower the resolution, then your heads-up display, UI, everything has a lower resolution now. So the better way to do it is using the resolution scale. Now, the way you do it and the way you use the resolution scale is that you essentially take this, put it to maybe 90 or 80, and you will be at 80% of 1080p or maybe even 60. This goes as low as 50%. So 50% of 1080p is something that most potato PCs can handle, and if your PC can still not handle this game at 50% resolution, maybe you should consider getting a new PC, or at least a new GPU at the very least. But anyway, there is that, and moving on to the next tab, which is graphics. Now in graphics, it is very important that you do not ever use adaptive quality. It is bad, like it's pointless. But anyway, moving on to anti-aliasing, you might see that my settings are on low, and there is a reason for that. It's because even though in the preview it kind of shows that low has a lot of anti-aliasing, that's not actually the case. Low is actually very good. And in case you are someone who is struggling with frames per second and you need to bump up that FPS, then this is something you might want to consider. Now moving on to the world details. Now world details you might notice I have on high. Thing is, there is not much of a performance difference between high, medium and low. There is a difference. There is like a 4% improvement between high and low. But then again, the reason why I'm not talking about percentages here is because I am running this on a 1050 Ti, as you can see on the bottom right of the screen right now. The thing is, when the frames per second are so low, if you try to calculate percentages, the error margin kind of increases, and so it's pointless talking about percentages then. What I would say though, if you absolutely need it, if you're say running a 960M or something, or maybe a 950M, it's a really old card, but it can run DirectX 12 games. If you're running an old card like that, if you're running a low power laptop card like that, you might want to put this on low because every frame counts at that point. So yeah, that is the world details. Now moving on from world details to clutter. Clutter is something that is extremely CPU dependent. It has actually got nothing to do with your GPU. In fact, I found no difference in the frame rate between very high and low. Like I went from very high, medium, low. I noticed no performance improvements there. So just keep it on very high if your CPU can handle it. If your CPU is already being utilized like 80-90%, then maybe do not bother with the clutter. But if your CPU is staying at like 40-50, yeah, go for very high. It's a setting that is very important because as you can see in the preview thing, it really populates the land with grass and stuff. So it is actually a very important setting, and you can just keep it on very high. It is not going to affect your GPU all that much. Maybe a 2% improvement here and there, but it's barely worth a look into because it's like 1 FPS at most, 1 or 2 FPS. So yeah, leave the clutter on very high unless you are bottlenecking with your CPU. In case your CPU usage is hitting its maximum, like going 85, 95, something like that, then yeah, do put this on low, but otherwise put it on very high and forget about it. Now, moving on to the next setting, which is the shadows. Now, shadows work a little weirdly in this case. Now, at first, especially if you have seen my benchmark video, I was using low shadows because that's what I default to. At that point, I didn't really do much testing with this. I just defaulted to low because I know low is going to do well. And I don't really mind the shadows looking a little bit blurry. It's fine for me. But I must say this, and I cannot stress this enough. You may not want to keep your shadows on low. Not because it looks crap, it's because medium looks better and there is no performance difference between the two. Like, absolutely not. I did not lose a single frame going from low to medium. Like, there might be a small performance, but you might only notice that performance difference when you are on an extremely high level card, maybe outputting 70, 80 or 90 frames per second. On these sort of cards, you are not going to notice the difference there. So yeah, just put it on medium. If you do have some headroom though, I would suggest you put this on high because high is really good. The shadow quality in high is really good. Of course, very high and ultra high are good, but after high, I feel like it's a point of diminishing returns. So like, even though the image quality is slightly better, the performance gap between them is not justified enough. So if you can go for it, if you have something better than a 1050 Ti, maybe a 1060 or maybe a 960, which is slightly better than a 1050 Ti, maybe go for the high shadows. You can go for it. It's like a 4% performance improvement for going from high to medium. If you have that headroom, go for the high shadows. Otherwise, medium looks good enough. You don't really need to worry about that. Now, the next setting is again a very weird one because if you guys have played Odyssey, if any of you has played Odyssey, and this is not anything about Odyssey's gameplay, I'm strictly talking about the settings here. Volumetric clouds was a huge performance hog. Like, it just tanked your performance, going from even off to medium. In this though, I don't know how they have done it, but they have optimized it to a level that I cannot really describe. So yeah, they have done a really good job with volumetric clouds because between very high and medium, you are getting about 2 to 3% performance difference. At least that was the case for me. And as I've said, it's not a particularly reliable system because the percentages might have some errors in them. So yeah, but even without that, I basically gained like 2 or 3 FPS, maybe sometimes in some cases going from very high to medium, but in general gameplay, you do not notice the difference in frame rates. Especially me, because I keep my FPS capped at 40. That's because I do not want the FPS going to 50 and then back to 35, then back to 50. It really gives me motion sickness, so like I just keep it at 40. So yeah, this game actually can go up to 50 at some points. So, but I do not do that. But moving on from that, very high is a sweet spot. Ultra high really affects your performance. It also dramatically improves your visual quality of the clouds and stuff. But I still feel like very high is a good sweet spot. If you can afford that, go for it. Otherwise, I would say just put it on very high and again, forget about it. Now, the next one is water. Now, water is important as there are 3 settings, low, medium and high. And honestly, I again did not notice much of a performance difference here. Now, you can say that these are very well optimized or just not optimized at all. I really don't know what to say about this. Now, the thing about this is that if you are on low, you will have a better performance when you are looking at water. But the thing is, yes, you are going to be moving around on the rivers a lot, but unless and otherwise there's a water surface, this setting is not going to change anything. So yeah, it is only applicable when you are close to water, or maybe when you are slightly looking at some water surfaces. And even then, I do not think the performance hit is enough. But in case you do want to gain FPS, I would say just put it on medium. Do not put it on low, because there isn't much of a performance difference between medium and low to justify putting it on low. But I would say put it on medium. That is kind of the sweet spot. I have it on high because, again, as I said, my FPS is actually higher than 40. And since I keep it capped at 40, I can do these things so that if my GPU usage stays somewhere around 100%. Now, moving on from that, moving on to screen space reflections. Now, this is something that you either have on or off, and it doesn't affect much of the performance. For me, for my testings, I saw around 2%, like not even a frame. Sometimes maybe a frame difference here and there. But again, this is only reflections on the water surfaces. So again, the same point applies as before. Unless you are like continuously on the water and you really want the water performance to be good, just leave this on because it's not going to matter. But in case you are struggling to get that 30 FPS, yeah, this might just improve that one frame. So you know what? Switch it off if you want to, switch it on if you want to, that's up to you. I would still recommend you put this on though, because the graphical quality improvement is a huge difference. Now, moving on to environment textures. Now, there are three options here: low, medium, and high. And since we are talking about pretty crappy PCs here, high is not an option, because even I can't run this on high. And I would say the 1050 Ti is the king of cheap GPUs. Actually, the 1650 Super should be the king of cheap GPUs. But 1050 Ti is much more common than that. The thing is, you have 4 gigabytes of memory. Even if you are on a 1650 Super, you have 4 gigabytes of memory. You are not going to run this on high. At least I think the 1650 has 4 gigabytes. I might be wrong on that. But yeah, on a 1050 Ti, there are just 4 gigs. High is not going to work. And especially if you're going much lower than that, if you are running a 2 GB card, actually, you may not be able to run this game at all. So there's that. Keep that in mind. So something like an 840M, even though it would, the reason why I'm bringing up an 840M is because I used to have one. So yeah, in case you have a really slow card, which is not even a proper gaming card, you may not be able to run this game properly because of this VRAM limit. So now, this game needs at least 3000 megabytes, 3200 megabytes to even run this on medium textures. And the low textures just reduces it by 100. It's still 3100. So it needs 3000 gigabytes, so 3 gigabytes of VRAM minimum on 1080p. Of course, if you lower the resolution, yeah, you will get an advantage there. But yeah, if you are running on a pretty crappy PC like I have, medium is the way to go. As far as the character textures go, leave it on high, because honestly it does not affect all that much. You can use high textures here. If you are really limited by VRAM, then maybe use the low textures. But otherwise, I would not do it if I were you. Just put it on high, forget about it. The next two settings are the most useless settings because I never use them. One is depth of field. I hate depth of field. It tanks your performance in some games, and even if in games where it doesn't really affect performance, like Valhalla, it doesn't really affect much of a performance here. Even then, I do not like it, and that is the reason it's off. But in case you like depth of field, I would say go for it. Air is not bad. It has 3 settings, of course: off, low, and high. I have seen like a 5% improvement going from high to off, and I just leave it on off anyway. So yeah, it's working just fine for me. The next setting, however, oh my god, I'm out of breath. Asthma is so bad. Anyway, so the motion blur. If you are someone who wants free frames per second, never use motion blur then, because here there's a 5% improvement in performance while using motion blur or not. I don't know why the hit is so high, Usually motion blur just doesn't even have a 8 in performance. I don't know why it's so high here. But even without that, if you're someone who uses motion blur on a PC game, just never talk to me because I do not like you. And no one does. Like, no one likes you. Yeah, there's that. Just do not use motion blur. Ever. Ever. Like, seriously. Please. Don't use it. Yeah? Cool? Fine. So that brings about the end of the settings part and the gameplay you're seeing right now. And in fact, the gameplay that you saw in the beginning is using these settings. And as you can see, I do want to clarify two things. One, I have said in my previous videos that I was running a slight overclock. Well, there is no overclock in this. This is just a stock laptop 1050 Ti. So it's not even as powerful as the desktop 1050 Ti. So keep that in mind. And another one is that this video is actually recorded at 30 FPS. The reason for that is that I am an idiot. And I forgot to actually put it to a 60 FPS record. The reason why I recorded 30 FPS is because of the sync issues. And if there is a variable frame rate which these games have, because let's be honest, my card is not as powerful, then I need to go to Handbrake and re-encode it again, just so that there is no delay between the audio and the video. So yeah, it sucks, but there's nothing really I can do about it. But anyway, that's the reason why I recorded 30 FPS usually. I usually in the benchmarks and stuff, I go back to 60 FPS, but I forgot to do it here. And I didn't want to record it again because the game barely functions sometimes, and that is something I will be talking about in another video. So now, as you can see, the FPS is at 44, 45, and when I actually apply my overclock, which I did, but again, I started recording, the bug happened and the FPS just tanked. So when I use higher overclock, this thing actually goes up comfortably to a 50 FPS. You just maybe saw some spikes of it going to 50 FPS when I was looking up. I'm talking about 50 FPS when I'm actually fighting enemies. Yeah, it does do that sometimes. So yeah, this game is, I would say, even with the issues in this game, this is still the best Ubisoft port I have seen in a long time. And you just have to understand this, that just have to understand how bad Ubisoft ports are, that even this, which still has the bug where the VRAM usage, right now if you can see on my screen, the VRAM usage says 3740 MB or somewhere around that. But if you have noticed on my screen before, it was saying that it is supposed to use 3209. So it is using almost 500 more. 600 more, because it even hits 3800, and as soon as it hit 4000, because it just keeps increasing the more I play it, the FPS tanks, and the only way to fix it is to restart the game. And that is the reason why I got frustrated, and that is one of the reasons why you are not seeing many gameplay videos from me on this channel. I absolutely intended to do gameplay videos here, but the reason why I'm not doing them right now is because of this. And now, I really hope Ubisoft actually fixes this issue, because I really do want to play the game. If Ubisoft does not fix this issue, then I may not put videos out on the channel about Valhalla, because it's really frustrating. I just might play it on my own time. Maybe I'll stream it on Twitch. So yeah, do follow me on Twitch. So yeah, that's basically all there is. These are the settings. This is the FPS. With my slight overclock on the 1050 Ti, I can even get to like 50. But I still keep it locked at 40 because the FPS still dips down below 40 sometimes, and I just want that consistency more. Like 45 FPS is nice, 50 FPS is nice, but I still would enjoy a consistent 40 FPS more than something which keeps alternating between 50 and 35, 36. Sometimes the lower ends go to like 35, 36. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say in this video. If you do enjoy my content, then consider pressing that like button. Do subscribe to my channel for more content, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. So, peace.